Well, hello, Nativity Bible heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Bible Study Wednesday. We are in the book of 1 Kings, and the way the kings go is the way the nation goes. That's the reason why the story of the kings is so important. It's not just a way of marking time, but it's actually the thing that makes all the difference in the world. We were talking about King Jeroboam last week. Who was Jeroboam? Jeroboam was the first king of the separated northern kingdom. Remember when Solomon passed, the kingdom was no longer united. It was broken up to the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, Jeroboam was he worked for Solomon. He was in charge of Solomon's forced labor. So he didn't actually just come out of nowhere, but a prophet sidled up to him one day on the road and said, "Hey, you're going to be the next king of Israel." Really, me? Yeah. So anyway, he didn't do well. Okay, I'm just giving you a little recap here. He didn't do well. He erected high places were temples. Anything. Our King's writer does not like it when places of worship are set up anywhere outside Jerusalem. It just doesn't work for him. So the sin of Jeroboam was his big undoing, and we are told that he died in 1 Kings 14. Chapter 14, verse 19. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred and how he reigned, and are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. The time that Jeroboam reigned was 22 years, and he slept with his ancestors, and his son Nadab succeeded him. Now, we're not going to hear about Nadab for a while. Why? Because the narrator is switching back and forth. He's giving us a picture of what happens with a king in Israel, then with a king in Judah, and sometimes he sticks with Judah and goes back. It depends on how much overlap there is, right? Because obviously their range wouldn't be the same amount of time. So one of the keys into reading the book of Kings is to keep track of, is he talking about the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom? And he'll throw you for a loop, the narrator will, when he says that in the years of the king of Israel, he'll talk about the king of Judah, date it with the years of the king in Judah or Israel. So it's confusing sometimes, but I'm hoping that for the first time, Kings won't be confusing, at least even to me, because I must confess, I've read through the whole thing, and when you read through it fast, you're like, what? Yeah, exactly. So when we start up with our section for today, we're in chapter 14, verse 21. Rehoboam, son of Solomon. So this is the first king that reigned in Judah since Solomon, the first one. Now, Rehoboam, son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city that the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. Very key. Yeah. Dwelling of his name, all right? Not the dwelling of God, but the dwelling of his name. Interesting. His mother's name was Naamah, the Ammonite. Now, Solomon was known for having multiple wives. Yeah. And this mention that Rehoboam's mother was an Ammonite probably doesn't bode well, does it? No. Watch. He did what Judah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. That's the whole country, right? The whole tribe. They provoked him to jealousy with their sins that they committed, more than all that their ancestors had done. For they also built for themselves high places, pillars and sacred poles on every high hill and under every green tree. This is horrible. Anytime you hear about building high places, pillars, sacred poles, that's all Canaanite god worship, not Yahweh. Every high hill, under every green tree, those are the outdoor sanctuaries that those spiritualist religions would celebrate. There were also male temple prostitutes in the land. Yeah, male temple prostitutes. Now, the literal wording for that is interesting. I wanted to get to it. Literally, holy consecrated persons. Yeah. Okay, you might be saying, well, wait a second. Isn't a priest a holy consecrated person? Well, yeah, but you don't have anything to hide if you're calling him a priest, right? So anyway, they were known for having sex during their worship. This was a part of the spiritualistic practice. It coincides with the tall phallic-shaped things that they would put up. Yes, that is true. It is all an illustration of how Rehoboam was not being faithful. Okay, and the bottom line is he's not going to be all that much different than Jeroboam was. Okay, they committed all the abominations of the nations that the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. So he basically said, everything that Israel did that got them driven out, they did it too in Judah. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, King Shishak of Egypt came up against Jerusalem. He took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took everything. So, remember where Israel was. Israel, the whole thing. It's a land bridge between Egypt to the south, and then the kingdoms to the north, and Aram and later called Babylonia and Assyria and all that. It was very advantageous if you wanted to conquer more territory to have this little land bridge. That's what Israel was, the land bridge. So King Shishak, he's like, oh, they're weak. I think I'll take them. Okay, well, there he did it. By the way, we do have reference in King Shishak's writings, the writings about him, that he did do a lot of damage up there. But we never have evidence that he came to Jerusalem, except for here. He took away the treasures of the king's house and the treasures of the king. He took everything. So remember, the house of the Lord and the king's house are two different things. Remember, Solomon built the temple and a palace. So the Lord's house and the king's house, two different things. He also took away all the shields of gold that Solomon had made. Solomon was so opulent. He even had shields for his guard made of gold. This is what we're told. Incredible. His opulence was like desired, if you shall say, you could say, and it ends up being booty, okay, for an attack. So he also took away the shield of gold. So King Rehoboam, verse 27, so King Rehoboam made shields of bronze instead. Yeah, well, we know bronze isn't as good as gold, right? And committed them to the hands of the officers of the guard who kept the door of the king's house. As often as the king went into the house of the Lord, the guard carried them and brought them back to the guard room. Okay. Verse 29. Thrilling, isn't it? Now, the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. this is a statement of fact. They never stopped warring with each other, quite frankly. And that little reference in verse 29, that's a part of the pattern of our book of Kings. It's basically saying, okay, if you want all the nitty and the gritty and the dirt and yeah, you go to the library. Go to the library. Yeah, do that. Go to the library. He's giving a theological history, okay? Not going to find that one in the library. Rehoboam slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah, the Ammonite. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, we were told it has an Ammonite mother before, which is probably why, oh yeah, no wonder he turned to foreign gods. His mother was an Ammonite. His son Abijam succeeded him. All right, let's continue. Chapter 15. Now, in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijam began to reign over Judah. Now, we're still getting the dating from Jeroboam's time in Israel, even though we're talking about the Judean kings now, okay? Abijam began to reign over Judah. He reigned for 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. By the way, we only get the mothers' names of the kings of Judah. Yeah. He committed all the sins that his father did before him. Oh, no. So who was his father? Yeah, Rehoboam. We just read about him, right? He committed all the sins that his father did before him. His heart was not true to the Lord his God, like the heart of his father David. Yeah. So for our deuteronomistically, theologically oriented narrator, the gold standard is David. David is the one who set up worship in Jerusalem and centralized it there, and our narrator digs him for this, okay? It's just digs him. It's like, oh, if only they were like David. Yeah, he centralized worship, and that's the reason why he talks with such disdain, our narrator does, with any kind of worship outside Jerusalem. Oh, that's, bad. So yeah, so let me read it. His heart was not true to the Lord his God, like the heart of his servant David, like his father David. Verse 4, nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, a metaphorical lamp, setting up his son after him and establishing Jerusalem. He's basically saying, if it weren't for the fact that his father was David, he would have been nothing. He would have been nothing. But because the Lord is being faithful to David, he actually stuck with this guy, even though he was just as bad as his father Rehoboam. And establishing Jerusalem, because David did what was right in the sight of the Lord and did not turn aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. We know what that's about, right? That's the Bathsheba incident. Yeah, even a writer, as much as he loves David, is like, okay, I know what y'all are going to say, but what about that incident about with your... I'm just going to throw that in just to make sure that you're happy. Verse 6, the war begun between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continued all the days of his life. The rest of the acts of Abijam, the rest of them, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? There was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. Abijam slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in the city of David. Then his son Asa succeeded him. Yeah, it was only, a three-year reign. But, next king. Oh, look what we have. verse 9. In the 20th year of King Jeroboam of Israel, still giving us the dating of the northern kingdom, because this is the third king to come to power in Judah since Jeroboam while he was. Because remember, he's already been to sleep with the fishes. He's already died. But we're getting it in the historical perspective. Asa began to reign over Judah. He reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. That's weird. His dad also had a mother whose name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. Maybe he wasn't his son. Maybe he was a brother. I know. He says it was his son, but unless there's another Maacah, daughter of Abishalom, he had to be a brother, right? Verse 11, Asa did what was right in the sight of the Lord. Finally we get a king who's doing right in the sight of the Lord. As his father David had done. He put away the male temple prostitutes out of the land and removed all the idols that his ancestors had made. See, you want to get this guy's accolades, you got to do that kind of thing. No more idol profligation, pulling back. Verse 13. He also removed his mother Maacah from being queen mother because she had made an abominable image for Asherah. Asa cut down her image and burned it at the Wadi Kidron. Asherah worship was demarcated with wooden poles. That's the reason why you cut it down, you chop it down. And Maacah, bless her heart, she was probably the reason why her other son did so poorly, right? Abijam? Yeah. All right. As Asa cut down her image and burned it at the Wadi Kidron. Burn it. Verse 14. But the high places were not taken away. What? Oh, so he did some good, but didn't do all the good that he could do. So he was a reformer of sort, but not to the degree that would have really had him elevated. But he still did right, mostly. But the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was true to the Lord all his days. He brought into the house of the Lord the votive gifts of his father and his own votive gifts, silver, gold, and utensils. Anytime you're doing good in the cultic things, our narrator loves it. Now there was war, verse 16, between King Asa and King Baasha of Israel all their days. And you might be asking, who is King Baasha? Yeah, he's the next king in Israel. We haven't even heard about him yet. So obviously this is an overlap time, okay? Asa in Judah, Baasha in Israel. King Baasha of Israel went up against Judah and built Ramah to prevent anyone from going out or coming in to King Asa of Judah. So it was kind of like a fortress, if you will, in the land of Benjamin, which is just about 6 miles north of Jerusalem. Then Asa took all the silver and gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house and gave them into the hands of his servant. King Asa sent them to King Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimman, son of Hezion of Aram. Oh, a more powerful king to the north. He's like his way of like, okay, I needed to get into an alliance with the king to the north of my enemy here so that I can get this under control. Who resided in Damascus, saying, verse 19, let there be an alliance between me and you, like that between my father and your father. Like David had an alliance with the king in Damascus as well. I am sending you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your alliance with King Baasha of Israel, so that he may withdraw from me. Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel. He conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel, Meth, Ma'akah, and all Chinnerat, with all the land of Naphtali. So he really did some damage. When Baasha heard of it, he stopped building Ramah and lived in Tirzah. So it worked, basically. The fortress city he was building between him and Israel and Judah wasn't going to be a whole lot of good if he had this menace to the north who was on Judah's side. Yeah. Then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah. None was exempt. They carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building. With them, King Asa built Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. So, yeah, that fortress city Ramah was no more, and instead, King of Judah, Asa of Judah, he was able to build two fortress cities of his own in the same vicinity, basically. Okay. Now the rest of the acts of Asa, yeah, right? Now the rest of the acts of Asa, all his power, all that he did, and the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Go to the library. But in his old age, he was diseased in his feet. Now, okay. Whenever we see the word feet, we've got to consider that it could be a euphemism for something else, typically the male member. Yeah. Just giving you a heads up there. Then Asa slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of his father David. His son Jehoshaphat succeeded him. Jumpin Jehoshaphat. You remember that name? I think wasn't it a Looney Tunes cartoon guy? I used to say that. Suffering Saccatash. All right. We're going to cover one more king here, and then be done. All right. Nadab, son of Jeroboam. Oh, now we're getting to Nadab. So, wait, you might be saying, but wait a second. I thought Baasha was king of Israel. Well, Asa's reign was a very long one, and it covered this guy as well. So that's the reason why you didn't hear about this king of Israel during Asa's reign. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the second year of King Asa of Judah. He reigned over Israel 2 years, short one. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. There weren't a whole lot of good kings in Israel, in the northern kingdom, okay? Did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of his ancestor and in the sin that he caused Israel to commit. Baasha, son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So really nothing going on with Nadab. Yeah. For Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. Verse 28. So Baasha killed Nadab in the 3rd year of King Asa of Judah and succeeded him. See, now we're not even getting theological history now. We're getting like just summary statements of like, nothing to report here. He didn't do anything good, so, and he didn't stop anything that was going bad, so next. As soon as he was king, he killed all the house of Jeroboam. He left to the house of Jeroboam not one that breathed until he had destroyed it, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite, because of the sins of Jeroboam that he committed and that he caused Israel to commit, and because of the anger to which he provoked the Lord, the God of Israel. Oh my goodness. So, there's some vindication here, if you will, for a narrator, in that the house of Jeroboam gets its comeuppance by being wiped out by this guy. Okay? And you remember that servant Ahijah? That was that prophet. That was the prophet that sidled up to Jeroboam on the road and said, hey, you're going to be the next king of Israel. So there were some other things that he said that weren't as good a news, but here we get a reference to that character again. Now, the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Go to the library. There was war between Asa and King Baasha of Israel all their days. Fascinating. That is all we're going to do this week, folks. We'll start, we'll be in chapter 16, but we're going to start in chapter 15, verse 33. And we're going to go through 16. And then, I know this might not be a particularly spiritually enriching portion of our trek through the Bible, but it is important that we understand the milieu, the literary milieu that existed in Israel when we talk about when Jesus came on the scene, and we talk about the scriptures and what the scriptures say. Well, we know that Jesus didn't reference this stuff. We know that. What does that teach us? It teaches us that maybe some things are more valuable than others. Yeah. That's heresy for some people to hear, to say that about Scripture. But essentially, yeah. There you have it. Peace.